you might all know the word. It's a word that is not easy to translate in some of the languages. It's a word we never use in French because there are some elements behind literacy translated in French that have a challenging past use. It's a concept that came from the US that has drastically changed since the time it came to us. It came to Europe thanks to some projects at that time that were DGRTD funded. You will see a bit later in the panel Ivan, that was part of this journey. It has changed also because initially it was a word for marine science educators mainly, and that it has moved to a much wider group of professionals that are delivering ocean literacy-like services. And behind ocean literacy you will find other words that are not exactly the same, but that might be connected to it, like education, awareness raising, bringing the attentions of people about the ocean, and trying to bring enough understanding so we can do something slightly better in our daily activities that will have a benefit for the ocean. It says change of focus also because initially the target of ocean literacy was children. And then when it moved to Europe in particular, people say, but look guys, everybody has an ocean literacy issue, needs to understand how he is connected to the ocean, and how, whether as a decision maker, as a researcher, a professional, what I do impacts and what I could do to slightly reduce the impact on the ocean. So this was a very significant change in the ocean literacy journey. And then what has changed also is that at the beginning ocean literacy was very much about, look, the ocean, this is beautiful, this is under pressure, with many pictures and knowledge about the functioning of the ecosystem. And I think it has also changed because what is the focus now is mainly much more the human ocean connections. And behind these connections, rather complex. Everything that we do in our daily life can be the focus of ocean literacy. When I use my mobile phone, I seem to be very disconnected from the ocean. But in fact, I'm very connected to it, whether because I use submarine cables that will bring the knowledge somewhere, because when I send pictures on Instagram, it will be stored somewhere, it will require some energy. And all this might come from energy connected to the ocean directly or indirectly. So this connection and this ocean literacy conversation has evolved, showing that it was much more complex than what we initially thought. And it has changed also in terms of how we saw our capacity and our channel to bring the ocean to people's mind. 10 years ago, we were doing like, let's organize a training, a session, a teaching session to tell you how important the ocean. And if you look at today ocean literacy, you will see many artists, professionals that come from completely different disciplines that are helping us to bring emotion and understanding about the importance of the ocean. So that's also a move that has widened the community that had an interest in ocean literacy. So this was the history. So today we are here. There are many, many ocean literacy initiatives taking place at all levels. If you look at the title of this day conversation, there is a grassroots name that is inside. So effectively, if you go to many territories, cities, you will find activities for education carried out by NGOs, educators, private companies too that are supporting a share of knowledge to some of the public. So that's very nice, very diverse, and it has moved to all levels because depending on countries, some activities are taking place to integrate an ocean literacy element into the curricula of schools. So we are looking at a national level initiative, and then it came even up to the EU with, for example, the support to the EU for Ocean Coalition. I will come back to it a bit later and in the panel discussions. So many initiatives very inspiring, with some challenges, because sometimes the feeling that there is quite some fragmentations, there is sometimes a bit too much not connected. And then often also we are very excited, inspired in carrying out the initiatives, but we do not spend as much time asking ourselves, but was it really useful? Did it have added value? And did it help moving our understanding to a stage where I can effectively take an informed decisions, whether as an adult, as a decision maker, etc. So many initiatives, but maybe not enough attention given to understanding the impact of these initiatives and whether we effectively support transformation in society that is required at the end, like Sudhanshu said, that we effectively take care about the ocean. And as I said earlier, because of the widening of the topic, the target groups, the initiators of ocean literacy, we are also attracting a bit of attention from the media and communication community. That's why I said REVOLVE felt obliged to have an article on ocean literacy, because maybe they felt if we don't do it, we are missing something. I'm joking, let's say, if this happens is also because REVOLVE is one of our partners in the EU for Ocean Coalition. And one of the objectives of the events here today and of the work of REVOLVE is also to try to attract more attention from the media community, because we believe that there are very strong, powerful mechanisms to amplify what we believe is a good word and good ideas, but unfortunately often restricted to our traditional ocean community, which are already people that are committed to ocean protection, but clearly that's not enough. It's the others. They do not care or do not realize that there is a connection with the ocean that we have to bring on board of an ocean conversation. Because the fragmentations, there is an issue of how we build connection between the many that are doing ocean literacy, living ocean literacy in their daily life. And that's where came the initial idea of the EU for Ocean Coalition, which is a European Commission supported initiative trying to build connection between many different people to try to support collective actions on ocean literacy. If you read at the website of the EU for Ocean Coalition, initially financed by DG Mare, today financed by CINEA, so that it's still a European Commission initiative, you will see that there are 3 pillars. One is called the EU for Ocean Platform, where we bring professionals together to try to think and to act collectively supporting ocean literacy activities. There is a second pillar which is targeting the youth, young professional, called the Youth for Ocean Forum, that is bringing young people to an ocean conversation, supporting engagement. And there is a third pillar which is the school education pillar, with supporting the EU network of blue schools. These are the structure of the EU for Ocean Coalition. In reality, we are working trying to break the silos between these 3 pillars, trying to work as much as we can with some young professional, some private or public operators that are engaged into ocean literacy and ocean conversation, and connected to education with principles like open schooling, inclusiveness being essential to what we try to achieve around blue education itself. When we do it, we are not alone, because there are many instruments that are EC instruments, EU instruments, policies that are supporting us, whether it's the Mission Ocean supporting research, but supporting the translation of research towards society, that is also supporting ocean literacy initiatives, in particular around blue education. And we are also supported, for example, by Erasmus Plus funding, that are supporting initiatives, challenges in schools, and supporting teachers to get an ocean mind and bring this to the education. So that's quite, I would say, a wider framework and a wider landscape than just the EU for Ocean Coalition in itself. I think I'm going to stop here for this introductory speech. I hope it gives you a few ideas and will help to put the panel discussion a bit later. I want to thank REVOLVE anyway for doing what you are doing today, but much more. And then I give the floor to Kira to facilitate the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, welcome again, everyone, to this discussion on ocean literacy. My name is Kira Taylor. I'm an energy, climate and environment journalist based here in Brussels, and it's great to be able to discuss this topic today. The concept of ocean literacy is defined as a comprehension of how the ocean influences us and how we in turn influence the ocean. The ocean impacts us in many, many ways. It serves as one of the world's biggest carbon storages and produces food and oxygen. It also hosts a huge range of biodiversity alongside some of the uses that Pierre mentioned just now. Humans in turn influence the ocean, whether that is through conservation efforts or perhaps more negative impacts such as microplastics, ocean warming, overfishing. I'm sure we can think of many of those examples. To become ocean literate, then, is key to recognise the significance of the ocean, effectively communicate this and make informed decisions about the ocean and its resources. Over the next hour, we'll hear from speakers who are working in different sectors around the ocean. We'll start with an opening statement from each of them to describe what they're doing around the concept of ocean literacy, and then move on to a Q&A discussion. During this, you can ask your questions to our panelists. Just simply raise your hand when I ask and we'll bring a microphone across to you, but get thinking about the questions throughout the panel so that we have lots to ask. So to discuss ocean literacy in Europe, I'd like to invite all of our panelists up to the stage now. Please leave this chair for me and sit along there. The microphones are on the chair. To discuss ocean literacy, we have Pierre Strasser, who you've just heard from. He is head of environmental consulting and research company Action, which coordinates the EU for Ocean Coalition for Ocean Literacy. Next, we have Willem de Moor. He is the deputy director at the JPI Ocean Secretariat, a pan-European platform aiming to increase the efficiency and impact of research and innovation for sustainably healthy and productive seas and oceans. We have Ivan Knessa Alcolia. He is a research policy officer for marine biodiversity and ecosystems at the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. And Gail Ho, the European Affairs Coordinator at the Brussels office of NGO Surfrider Foundation Europe. She is also the manager of the Blue Up campaign, which is working on getting ocean protection into the next Commission's mandate. We have apologies from Sandra Castana from the European Commission's Directorate General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. She was hoping to make it, but unfortunately she cannot be here for health reasons. Now, I'm going to move. Well, thank you all, our panel, for joining us. And I'm hoping this microphone is working now. Yes, it is. So to start off the panel, I'll give each speaker a 5-minute opening statement on the role of community-based initiatives in expanding ocean literacy. Pierre, we've just heard from you, but I wonder whether you would be able to speak a bit more about how you're helping develop ocean literacy in Europe.
Thank you very much. Effectively, I will explain a bit more how we function, let's say, from an EU for Ocean Coalition perspective and what is our aim and why we believe people are coming to us, because there is some interest and added value in joining. So as I said, we have 3 communities, but maybe that's not the best way to characterize what we are trying to do, and in particular how we try to support engagement, including at local level. The first type of action that we do is to try to engage people, and we have different mechanisms to do this engagement. We have calls for young professionals to join with a project or a community. It's called Young Ocean Advocates Calls, let's say. and then we help and we provide mentoring in the engagement. At the same time, with the EU network of Blue Schools, we engage the education communities, teachers, to start to work on ocean project, blue projects, and then to join a wider network. The second element of what we do is to try to give recognition and visibility to some of the initiatives we talked about. And this recognition, visibility can be translated into, yes, I became a blue school, and that it recognizes a certain level of activities and inspirations towards the ocean matters. But it's also when we, every year, we have an exercise of identifying 3, 4, 5, 6 projects that we feel are worth sharing with a wider group. So we have, and it's announced by DG Mare every year at European Maritime Day, we have some ocean literacy awards that recognize some projects that we feel are inspirational, are worth sharing, and to give a bit of appetite of joining. And these projects are very practical, grassroots project most of the time, but not only, because we also try to find projects that can be replicated or that have a bit an EU dimension. We also, beside that, we support collective action, a bit financing them. So every year we have a call for collective action. We give a bit of money to some projects. In the first round, we have, for example, a project that is called Let's Save the Baltic Sea, which is a group of young people that are going to walk around the Baltic Sea. So it takes a bit of time. And they will do stopovers in some key cities. And in these cities, they will support an ocean discussions. Not alone, but together with the local municipalities, with scientists, research centers, and young professionals. So we feel this is exactly the spirit of the EU for Ocean. And that's what we want. That's why we said that's a project. Please try to do the same elsewhere. Try to feel about the philosophy of this project. And our last type of intervention, which is emerging now, maybe not yet fully mature, it's advocating. Advocating the importance of ocean literacy. I would say not only around the ocean community, but more with a policy and a policy angle and perspective. So how do we bring ocean literacy to policies? Not only the ocean policies, but elsewhere education policies, education strategies, or what is around the world of the media, because we are here today in the press. How do we ensure that when there is a new strategy about education, for example, somewhere ocean literacy finds a space, and then it's the best way for us to upscale and to make sure that progressively it becomes in everybody's daily life. So I stop here. I think it's enough.
That's great, thank you. We'll come back to you with more questions on it later. Willem, I'd like to come to you next. What's your view on this topic of engaging people in ocean literacy?
Okay, thank you, Kira, and I can explain briefly also what we're doing and then going into that. So you introduced me as the Deputy Director of JPI Oceans. We are a pan-European platform for coordination of ocean research. Can you hear me? No. Okay. All right. That's something. So basically, our members are research ministries, funding agencies around Europe who sit around our table and decide what joint priorities they want to undertake, what joint projects they want to fund. So we have projects running on microplastics in the ocean, to ecological aspects of deep sea mining, but also projects on emerging pollutants and more emerging topics like light and color in the ocean, or changing lightscapes in the ocean, and underwater noise. So in each of these activities, we have researchers and communicators actually developing their own ocean literacy activities. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In our microplastics project, one of the projects, for example, developed an app which allowed school children, people on the beach, to actually monitor the plastic distribution on the different beaches. This, of course, allowed them to see what kind of plastic was there on the beach, but also allowed researchers then to see what the distribution was of the different plastic sorts on local beaches. Another example is our joint action or our joint project on deep sea mining. There we had, for example, our researchers working together with the theater directors and working together on a theater play, looking into the actual potential impacts of deep sea mining, both from the researchers' perspective, researching the actual impact, but also from the industry side. And okay, I see another microphone is coming, perhaps. Yeah, right. Maybe this is better. Right. Okay. Okay. And also then at the same time looking at this topic from an NGO angle. So these are two concrete examples. So that led to a theater play, which is currently touring around Europe and even the world, showing the potential impact of future mining activities. What we do then now together with the EU for Ocean Coalition is we bring together these different projects and try to give them training on specifically ocean literacy and communication activities. And so that training can focus on the one hand on best practices, giving them the right tools to work and further develop their ocean literacy activities. But secondly, also, Pierre, you mentioned the word fragmentation, is to try to basically bring together these different projects, which each have their own individual activities, and try to do something also jointly and work together with that. So those are some concrete examples, and I'll perhaps give some others later on. So I'll close there. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Ivan, I'd like to come to you next to hear your approach to ocean literacy in Europe. You might need that.
Thanks. So we'll start a bit backwards, stepping on what Pierre said as an introduction, because I had the privilege to be the project officer for Sea Change and Responsible Project, which was the first actual project funding directly ocean literacy and its development in Europe. It came thanks to a joint perfect storm between the development of a cooperation treaty or agreement with Canada, United States of America, and where ocean literacy has started, but 40 years ago, with the ancestor of the community we have now, Ocean Literacy, which is the National Marine Educator Association, which developed curriculum from kindergarten to primary school for how to introduce concept. So when they arrive in junior high school, they have a basic knowledge, understanding of what is ocean and how it is connected to us. First motivation was that so much poor science education in general, and especially about marine science, that it was a voluntary effort that was supported by NOAA then, and with also some key players in Europe which were working on that, like Ciencia Viva, for instance, in Portugal, in UK, MBA, and also in Vlies in Belgium. And on that, we could include ocean literacy as a priority topic for this cooperation, this transatlantic cooperation. We got the fund then to fund project, and we had these two projects which helped to comfort the European Marine Science Educator Association, which is now running, still gathering the experiences and also the toolkits for educators, teachers, looking for ways to bring the ocean in their classes. Because I still also meet people or teachers in my environment which are still eager to look for materials or way to initiate their pupils to learn about the ocean. And then, thanks to this experience, also we could introduce a new criteria in the evaluation of research project proposal. So in DG Research, we have the funding program, which is the framework program. There was Horizon 2020, which was funding ocean literacy, Sea Change Responsible, and then consequently we could introduce in the last years of Horizon 2020 an additional criteria in terms of impact, which is outreach, involvement to citizens, and supporting ocean literacy. And this came now as a mainstream requirement in project, at least in marine-related aspect, even in Horizon Europe now. And it's even more the case with the mission, as recalled. The mission is funded by research. The mission restore ocean and seas, ocean and waters. So it's from the land to the sea. To involve citizens, so in the action taken locally. So it's to make research-based project, but with implementation locally with local actors, and to have then developing a committee of practice about restoration, protection, or sustainable use of the sea. And I speak about the sea, but there are also initiatives for water and for lakes and rivers. And to then make a momentum, and to also make visible the initiatives existing, and also to develop this charter, which is calling also for all existing actors, from research to civil society, to actually also contribute toward the same goals of restoring and protecting, at least for the targets of 2030, the target of the biodiversity strategy, European strategy, which is to protect 30% of our seas and land, and to restore. Thanks, now we have a restoration law with, of course, less ambitious targets than we hoped, but still we have it, and we have to restore 20% of degraded habitats by, to have measures in place. But to do that, and in parallel, we had the will to have the capacity to have citizens be able to participate, because they will not look at website or wait for people to come to them, or they will not look for that. And how to reach people inland, and also developing policies like MSFD, maybe you know, Marine Strategy Framework Directive from 2008. It was a revolutionary policy in the world, first to tackle biodiversity target, like good environmental status, including noise, already in 2008. So even criteria to establish it. And this is a policy based on science and requiring also the consultation at local level. But to consult people, they need to be concerned, to understand what and to find information. So also it's necessary to have iterate like a basic knowledge and understanding of having people to participate. And so it's extremely important to have the citizen involvement and be able to decide in good knowledge of the choice they can make or support. It could be a vote, could be in their participatory initiative. And still continuing now in a research project in Northern Europe, besides the mission, all our big projects on biodiversity exploration, cumulative impact assessment of stressors and modeling, observation, are also doing a lot in terms of materials for outreach.
Excellent, thank you so much. And finally, Gail, coming to you, what's your approach on ocean literacy in Europe? I think we might need to hand the microphone down.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Gail. I'm coming from the NGO Surfrider Foundation Europe. So it's a European NGO which has been fighting for the protection of the ocean for more than 30 years. Before I share with you my notes, I wanted to share a personal story. So I come from Marseille. It's a coastal city in France. And one very vivid memories I have is when I was a kid. I was, I think, around 10 years old. I was living in a very, in a disadvantaged, let's say, district of Marseille. And I remember in the last year of primary school, they brought us to the sea. And I had classmates who had never seen the sea. This was crazy for me. And I can really remember their eyes discovering the sea, the sound, the sand. This was absolutely crazy. And we had half of the class coming from outside of France, outside of Europe. And they were saying, look, my parents are scared by the sea, so that's the reason why I think they never brought me there. So this is something that really marked me. we were living by the sea, but they had never seen the sea. And I really hope since this day they came back and enjoy the sea, because it's really a source of enjoyment, relaxation, well-being. In addition to all the ecosystem services you also shared, Pierre, in your introduction. So now coming back to Surfrider. So we, as you may imagine, because our mission is really to have a healthier ocean, a more protected one, we try to activate all levers, and this includes education, of course, but we also, and this is more my role here in Brussels, we do advocacy, we develop science projects, we also activate mobilization. We work with very local groups, but education has always been one of our. It has been one of the levers we've been activating since the very beginning. More and more, as Pierre was sharing, this is interesting. We've been following the development of ocean literacy because first we were indeed trying to educate. And we were targeting kids, teenagers, etc. And more, we've been targeting more groups. And now one of our core principles within our ocean literacy strategy is really to target also decision makers and also business, in addition to society as a whole. So it's not only kids and teenagers, and maybe putting more efforts in education, training, etc. But it's also putting a lot of efforts in embarking all society. So we have developed a strategy with a series of principles. One of them is inclusion. This is a bit of echo with my personal story, but we feel a lot of people actually not seeing the benefits or not benefiting themselves of the ocean because they seem far away. So we've developed an initiative with a sailor to try to also embark young disadvantaged people and make them discover the sea through sports. I didn't mention it, but our name, Surfrider, comes from it's where we come from. So we were created initially by surfers who were really sick of going to the sea and come back sick or having surfed in a very unclean environment. Now we are more than a surfing community. We are an ocean community, an ocean-based community. But we've seen really the importance of embarking other groups. One very important element we are stressing here in Brussels is the importance of all these ocean literacy efforts to try to pursue them with an ultimate goal, which is to protect the ocean and not necessarily try to exploit it more, something that is always worth recalling. In terms of other elements that really guide our strategy and philosophy on ocean literacy is the importance of being universal, but also adapt to local situations, local environments, especially in Europe. You know, it's not the same developing ocean literacy projects in the Med than in the Baltic Sea. Of course, being always science-based is very important. Other elements also we are trying to develop is this connection with emotions. I think this is also something that is at the core of the mission board, and something the Commission has really understood the importance of establishing an emotional bond between the ocean and us. Other elements are also to be trying to engage people, but so that they, in the end, change their practices, their habits. It's not only about informing them about what's happening with the ocean, our relation, our impacts, but also ultimately to have them to change and also to think on their own it's also we are trying to have them as ambassadors. You are trying to we are trying to achieve several steps. So it's basic is informs, and you want to change, and then you want them to be ambassadors. And I think it's something that we must keep in mind. I could continue a lot. We'll stop maybe here.
We'll move on to some questions, and I'm sure you can elaborate in some other areas there. So a really useful understanding of everything that's going on in Europe and internationally as well, and that kind of idea of having the universal connection to the sea, but also it's going to be local at points as well, and there's always going to be an emotional tie as well as a financial tie for many people, and there's going to be people who've never seen the sea before, which again for me is a very strange concept given I grew up next to it. Pierre, I'd like to come to you. We've heard some of the amazing work that's been done, but also maybe some of the gaps that need to be filled. What are the challenges that you see in engaging people in ocean literacy, and how do you think those can be solved?
Thanks a lot. I'm not sure how to solve them, but I will share a few. The first one reflects on what Gail said about socially vulnerable groups, and I will attach to the difficulties we have to go out of our comfort zone, because a lot of ocean literacy activities are like for the people we see every day, with mechanisms and tools that we are all using, etc. And then we have about, yes, ocean is great, is under pressures, but very targeted or linked to what we are used to live on our daily life. So we have difficulties to move outside of it, and in particular in ocean literacy. The second difficulty we face is still the complexity. In some way, 20 years ago, when ocean literacy was just about describing the ecology and the ecosystem, it was easy. But when we start saying we want to capture the human-ocean connection, they are so complex and interrelated, then which message we give becomes a bit a challenge in itself. Because under each message moving towards better practice, for example, we know that there will a negative impact elsewhere through the chain. And so that's what exactly we share and we help people to understand. At the end of the day, what you would like that ocean literacy brings is only the capacity to critically analyze knowledge that is arriving to a person, which is a much wider issue than ocean literacy itself. The third challenge we face, Ivan mentioned, is landlocked. We come all from an ocean community. Thanks to Mission Ocean in particular, from an ocean literacy discussions came, I would say, a blue literacy discussion when we recognize the source to sea connections. Because many things that happen on the sea comes from elsewhere. So how do we reach not only the inhabitants of Marseille that never went to the coast or to the sea, but the inhabitants, like what we try to do in Strasbourg, and try to tell in Strasbourg there is a connection to the sea and a complex one, so you need to get a responsibility. And the last point, which is very tricky, is about breaking the silos. Because even if we say we mobilize everybody, there are still also silos in our fields. If you think about education, you get a blue education movement, you get a green education movement, you get a sustainable education movement, and you get networks that might be national, European, and international. And each of these wants to keep a certain visibility and existence while they are all working on the same philosophy and principles. So how do I go beyond what is the way we are as humans to effectively break the silos? For this one, I really don't have the answer.
Ivan, I'd like to pick up on that idea of source to sea and maybe hear what you think are the major challenges in passing on ocean literacy, not just to those who are directly affected by the ocean, but to those who are much further away from it.
Well, I think it's a general issue also for what we could say environmental or sustainable literacy or ecosystemic view of the ocean is particularly poorly addressed, and but in general context of, I will say, to connect people to their real nature, to our nature. And I want to second underline what Pierre said, and Gaël, je te connais, mais l'émotion de te revoir, de vous revoir. Just said the emotion is key. Indeed, the first definition of ocean literacy was the influence of the ocean on you and your influence on your understanding your influence on the ocean. And it started to, the oxygen you breathe, half of it has been coming from the ocean organism. The food you eat, the water you drink, or the rain, the clouds are coming from the ocean, etc., etc. But the actual feeling of the connection of our natural connection is like when you see a fish, you see, when I see a fish, I don't see a fish. I see a fish, but I see the plankton, which feed on phytoplankton, which grow on light and nutrients coming from upwelling currents, nutrients coming from the erosion of mountain rising for billions of years on the planet. And it's a history of billions of years that reach us, and we are just a byproduct of an evolution starting from the ocean. And our connection is vital in the sense of land-based life could start thanks to the life in the ocean, starting accumulating oxygen, etc., etc. And I remember also the actual experience of people to be inside the water, to see what's underneath, and so to bring those long-locked people, I would say it should be mandatory or to fund like at least 2 years, 2 years in a row, C class for all primary school, student school, junior school, high school, to actually spend 3 weeks or in a sea class, by the sea, to walk on the beach, see a starfish or crabs, and understand some stuff with local people, and breathe the air, and swim, snorkel, and see the life under. I personally took some surfers, also some snorkelers and scuba divers. I'm a scuba diver. I did a bit of surf, but I'm too not agile. And I chose to be a scuba instructor because when you have a new divers, if you can do that in a place where you have life to see, not like in the port or harbor, when you see the light in the eye of a new diver, or the first experience of actually watching and feeling what's underneath, it's a new world. Okay, you have a new ambassador. Really. And then you start to build on and speak to his friend or friends, etc., etc. And so to actually experimenting this is paramount. And of course, maybe it's not easy to have everybody going experience that, but we should as much. It should be like, or to put people also going 3 weeks by the sea, 3 weeks in the forest as well. I don't know, that to really feel the connection, because half of the people now, half of the population is living in the cities and born and growing in cities. They don't see much the season pattern. Of course, they see a shorter light, shorter daylight, etc. But to actually feel the season, the change in the insects and things, just that also it's a problem. So I will think, I will then finish. We have also to me also a challenge, which is this landlocked and the resource to do that. But also the shifting baselines, because we are dealing with people now. So we are growing in a world already depleted, already transformed. And it's difficult to raise awareness on, it was much lively, it was much thriving, and so it's not okay if we're going back to a situation of 5 years ago. And especially for politicians or deciders. Shifting baselines is a concept in the cognitive bias we have, and we do have it also, because we always think about the last few things we did, or the last minutes, or the last week, but we are really forgetting how many birds we could hear when I was a kid in even the suburbs of Paris. Okay, I was not in Paris, but now, when I was going back there, I could not hear the same birds. Only a crow and I don't have nothing against the crew, but it changed a lot. And then you get the link with the half of the bird disappearing and seabird as well disappearing from the European environment in the last 40 years. So it's shifting baselines, and then the politician responsiveness and when to listen to citizens. I speak for example of France, we had this a forum of listening to citizens about action for climate and environment and to make proposals, etc. And then nothing is done. So we have this fatigue, which is also harming our efforts. Because if you want to arm them to contribute, they must be listened as well. So to really also have an axis on this democratic aspect.
Thank you. So really emphasising getting people to the coast and seeing it. I have to say, as someone who has surfed, you definitely feel a lot of connection with the ocean, and it's normally quite cold. Willem, maybe let's come to you next. Where do you see these challenges happening, and maybe in the work that you've done, what have you done to try and get around those?
Okay, yeah, maybe challenges, but I'd like to also maybe briefly go back to what you mentioned to Pierre is with regards to the current gaps in ocean literacy, because we do see gaps. Currently, ocean literacy is very much, environmentally driven, and comes from the research community, NGOs, etc., from public authorities. But we see a lot of potential engaging with the private sector, and there are already several initiatives. But there's much more which can be done. The OECD predicts that the ocean economy will have doubled versus 2010 by 2030. So we see an enormous increased use of the ocean, ranging from offshore wind industry to maritime transport, of course, to new activities like deep sea mining, etc. So from our side, we see an enormous potential there, engaging with the private sector. On the one hand, showing them what their environmental impact is, and how they can potentially change that. But on the other hand, also sort of how they can see their role in the green transition. So it can also sort of enable them to showcase the maritime industry as an industry of the future, an industry which can actually make a difference in the green transition through, let's say, for example, offshore wind industry, aquaculture, etc. So therefore also enabling, giving that information to investors, to school children who would be interested, for example, looking at the maritime industry as a future sector. So that's one of the, let's say, the major gaps we currently see, and which we will be working on together with a new initiative actually from the European Commission and the member states around Europe, the Sustainable Blue Economy Partnership, where we will try to work together with these private sector partners, trying to get them in, survey them first to see what the actual gaps are, and then try to work with them on developing new activities. So, yeah.
Thank you, Gail. I'd like to pick up on this idea of the gaps that you're seeing as well, particularly in Brussels. Are you seeing that there's a disconnect between the legislation that's being put on? And so if we can pass the microphone down to Gail.
Yeah.
And get
Thank you. I will react to what was just said, so there are more debates here. I still think it's important that ocean literacy is driven by scientific groups and NGOs, because as I shared before, I think the ultimate goal should be to make us act more, do more, so that the ocean in the end is more protected, healthier. What we see more and more is a tendency from certain business, and I really want to insist on certain, because some business are doing great, but there is a sort of blue washing, we like to call it. It's not green washing, but it's blue washing based on ocean issues, where they say, I'm going to invest a lot in ocean literacy, I'm going to invest a lot in carbon compensation, I will invest in blue carbon capture, blah, blah, blah. And then we ask, and are you going to change your practice? Well, so we must be careful also in pushing business to do more on ocean literacy. I think it's very, very important to educate them, so they are more and more aware of the impacts. and also push them to, of course, diminish the impact. But let's be careful on involving them or make them drive the ocean literacy agenda. On your question on challenges and if we see a disconnection between decision makers and the situation on the ground, of course there is a disconnection, because what we see science or what we hear from our groups from the ocean community is really a sense of urgency. The situation is very bad. It's not going to in the right direction. Here in Brussels, it was mentioned, I totally agree, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive was extraordinary. We must be very proud of this legislation, but at the same time, and it's both a responsibility from the Commission and Member States, of course, we had an objective that was to reach good environmental status of European seas. This was not reached. The deadline was 2020, and we are in 2023, and nothing is happening. So, I mean, we are saying, we are not good with. we are a bit late, indeed. So, of course, there is hope, because I know there is an intention from the Commission, for example, to revise this text. So, hopefully, we'll make this happen, and we'll make this directive deliver in the end. But of course, there is a sense of we are worried, we are scared. So that, and even more with the future, let's see, the future parliament we have, etc. That situation might be worse in the future, but we really need action, and that's the reason why I started saying that ocean literacy is also about educating our decision makers, so they see that, based on science, they must act boldly and with ambition here in Brussels as well, with good policies and driving also the agenda in terms of sustainability, environmental protection. And you were speaking of challenges and difficulties. It's also hard for us to keep motivating our community when they see this gap. And one of our big challenges is to bring them hope also. We are trying to do so, and I think the EU for Ocean Coalition is also showing hope and inspiration. A lot is happening, and we can change the situation. But for this, we need really all players, and here in Brussels, we have a lot of responsibility as well. It's not only about informing, as I said, educating, it's also about acting in the end and changing the situation. So.
Thank you. Ivan, I was coming to you anyway, but you look keen to respond to that. One thing I would maybe add to your response is this something which the Commission needs to do more of, or are you really looking at Member States now for the implementation of all of this work?
By definition, it's up to Member States to implement. The Commission has no power to intervene in the States. That's it's by law, it's Member States have to translate the directive into national law and then implement them. It's not the Commission going there to implement it, but we are receiving the pledges and the annual improvement, and they are evaluated by specific service in the environment, for instance, but there's not much stick, or there could be stick. There have been some, infringement about some level of pollutants, but in terms of general implementation, there's it's really up to the states to do that, and this is then coming to the role of citizen as the impact of vote and to who we are voting for, and especially also at the local level. I think we have maybe more response at local level than nationwide, because people are closer. But nevertheless, we need also change of culture, so we need also change of people mind, or maybe generation as well, because we cannot do as we used to do. It's not possible. Anyway, the correction is coming right now at the speed. You underline the emergency. It's super emergent. Staying every day, maybe you have some scientists here, and looking at report data articles from what's going on. It's I'm not alcoholic, but I will become soon, maybe. Have you seen, just for instance, the sea surface temperature of 2023? It's out of the chart. the average temperature between the temperate latitude in North and South Hemisphere. We are way above the chart from the old average from 1982 to 2010, and well above the most warm years until 21. 22 was also really higher, but 23 was out of chart. And 23 finished to start 24 above the start of 23. So we are starting already at a record sea surface temperature in January. Temperature determines seasons, larval development, population, assemblage of species, development and currents, plus the pollution, you name it. We are still ongoing overfishing. It's a fact. We still have super trawlers. We have a big capacity of fishing, whereas we fish less. But and now we are going to investigate mesopelagic because in a sustainable way. But we cannot just do as the same momentum to do the same thing as we did in the mine on land to do the same in the deep sea, because then the same process, the same logic of permanent growth. And then I would like to finish with the Meadows report, 1972 or 1971, MIT, Club de Rome, etc. Everything was already well forecasted. It was scientists from different level, economists, on what is going now in terms of, if we don't change the way we see the growth, mindset and use the resources, we are going in a wall, because indefinite growth in a finite world, mathematically, is nonsense. So now we should have economics, which are some science, but to be more listening to the hard science, which are not theory or concept, which are based on fact, which is science, and science should lead the way.
Thank you. We're beginning to run out of time for the Q&A, but I'd like to have some maybe more hopeful suggestions from the panel as well. Not that that's not important, but I think maybe, Willem, we can come to you. Do you know an example of a best practice that you think is replicable across the EU when it comes to creating ocean literacy?
I'll have to think about that for a bit. No, I think maybe that question, Pierre, I don't know if you have a best practice in mind right away. I think one of the things that Pierre within the EU for Ocean Coalition has been working on, the Blue Schools concept, I think that is something which can be massively expanded still. So the idea is there really to work together with schools, try to engage them, and try to really get them to sign up to changing their curricula, because we see in the existing curricula that people always fall back to in their, let's say, in their scientific lesson plans, etc. They always fall back to, let's say, terrestrial examples. They never really look into, let's say, the role of the ocean in our climate, in weather patterns, etc. And I think that's what the Blue Schools are trying to change. And so this movement is already existing. Schools can sign up to this Blue School program. They can then be officially recognized as Blue Schools. So I think that is, let's say, a hopeful message, starting there with school children, teaching them what the actual impact is on of the ocean in the environment. So.
Thank you. Pierre, do you want to follow that up with anything you've seen it as a best practice?
Yeah, I'm a bit like Willem. I'm not too sure. There are practices that touches us a bit more. Let's say there are experiences that go to vulnerable groups, people that don't have a capacity to touch and reach the ocean. But the best practice I think we should look at is the practice, not so much grassroots, because there are many, but the practice that have been able to upscale to a higher level some of the principles that we feel are behind ocean literacy. And if I go back to the example of the EU network of Blue Schools, which is for us, we are working on it daily, it's great, or the education activities that Surfrider is doing. But if you go to France, we will do 100 projects, we are going to do 200 Blue School projects. And there are in France, I don't know how many schools, classes, etc. There are maybe there are 35,000 municipalities, and there is I don't know how many schools. So my main challenge on best practice is, and that's what we should try to do, is to get our head out of the ocean and the ocean literacy community, which is what we are here, and to try to see not exactly the way we dream about, but how other communities that are essential to bring transformation start taking into account a small part of what we feel is essential. So if I succeed in France, maybe it's not the easiest country, but to integrate into the education community a small part of what is essential for us, I will touch potentially all the schools in France with a very, very higher number of people than what I will be able to do physically myself alone. And these upscaling efforts, there are some, like in Flanders, in the curricula, I feel there are some elements of ocean that are integrated, and this is a way to move forward. And if we are here in a press house, it's also because we believe that if we are able to touch the media community, maybe we are able much more effectively to touch, not fully, but to touch many more citizens, inhabitants, and youth.
Thank you, Gail. I'd like to come to you on what you're hoping for from the next European Commission. We've heard of some of the issues that you think may be happening, and in a minute we'll come to questions from the audience, but quickly, what are you hoping for the next Commission when it comes to developing ocean literacy?
Wow, the list is long. We actually prepared with Other Blue NGOs here in Brussels a manifesto with all our demands. On ocean literacy, well, I would say keep working, keep developing, keep making us collaborate all together through the EU for Ocean Coalition. I think this is an initiative that must continue. Same with the Ocean Mission Board. I think this was a great initiative and needs support. I know the future is blurry, but I hope these initiatives will continue. We need funding. I know there will be a big discussion on funding in the next mandate. So of course we need funding always, always, always. We need good policies. I think this was said, but we need to have ocean literacy in all policies. They really support implementation then on the ground, so I would say so. I have millions of demands, so I don't know where to start.
That's a good first list. Maybe
Okay.
if we have some questions from the audience, maybe anyone would like to pick up on that or anything else that's come out of the discussion so far. Please don't be shy. Any question is okay.
Yes, hi.
Can you say your name and your organisation?
Yes, sure. Larry Moffat with Rise for Climate Belgium. Just before I came over here, I listened to the BBC NewsHour radio program and a report on bottom trawling, which is this fishing technique of dragging nets along the sea floor and picking up everything, causing tremendous environmental damage. But the report said that it's also releasing enormous amounts of CO2, estimated to be equivalent to the CO2 impact of aviation, which I think is on the order of 3% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm just wondering if any of you are working on the issue of bottom trawling and whether you're aware of this new information about the carbon impact.
Would anyone on the panel like to respond? Ivan, maybe?
Sure. And I see so Forbes relate that it's a Nature paper released very recently that at least half of the carbon disturbances or the organic, inorganic carbon that's sedimented on the seafloor, which is turned off after trawling passes, so become aquatic. And at least the studies say half of it goes back in the atmosphere within the 5 to 7 years. But we have trawling every day and every year, so it's a tremendous amount. But on top of that, I mean, CO2 is a problem. but water is a problem. Water vapor, and if it's a dramatic source of carbon, but it's also a dramatic cause of destruction in terms of habitats, in terms of life cycle, and also the living biomass is a carbon stock. We have lost 70% of the megafauna on Earth and even in the ocean. And this megafauna and the big school of fishes were living carbon biomass in circulation, like the tropical forest, Amazonian was, until recently, self-turning carbon storage. It's a living biomass, not only in the wood or in the sediment. So it's important to protect those habitats, indeed. And they are normally protected area with measures of management. And it's up to the states to decide the way they want to manage their MPAs. I'm French, so I'm a bit annoyed, but for a statement from I should not do that. That when the Marine Action Plan has been released last year, it's a recommendation. It's a spin-off from the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, the Marine Action Plan released by DG Mare and co-written with the environment on recommendation, like we should maybe avoid trawling in the protected area. And the first reaction of the Ministry of Maritime Affairs in France was, no way, we'll never stop doing that, we'll protect you. And then, well, it's difficult to keep, that's the situation. So it's to make also politicians accountable and understanding what they're doing, or what trawling is a short-termism. Okay, they want to save maybe a big company because trawling requires a lot of resources, energy, so subsidies, so big trawlers. It's not protecting the small fishermen. So it's also this, and those fishermen will have less to fish after the big trawler pass. So it's a combined thing. So it's climate, but I will just finish with we focus on climate, which is true, it's a big problem, but even if climate will be solved, I mean, we could stop the CO2 and going back, we are already, nevertheless, in a big trouble. The wave of catastrophe coming from ecosystem collapse, which started from awareness from the 70s with 1992 Rio, which created the CBD, was about the state like, wow, we are going in a wall. And 1992, we had only COP15 last year for biodiversity. We have COP28 for the climate. So climate because it's more like physical science, more maybe linked to productivity, reproduction, mathematical things. Ecosystem is more complex, it's natural resources, it's policy management of soil and water, it's more but the problem is there. And coming back to water, pollution, for instance, because we had to scrap the reduction of pesticide, for instance, and pollution, which is at play for decades in the sea, coming from the land, from pesticide, water, from the cities, are causing, are linked to the halves of the phytoplankton in the ocean since the 1950s, which is the main source of the surface microlayer. Surface microlayer is a bunch of lipidic molecules and microbiota created by the byproduct of phytoplankton, the plankton activity. It's just very micro, but it limits the evaporation of seawater in the atmosphere. And so below what the physical law would be. So with the reduction of surface microlayer, it explains the speed up of warming because we have more greenhouse gas, which is water vapor, and there's more storms, and so it's we have to see a systematic way to solve things, not only about climate or fishing, but by stopping trawling, for instance, in critical area. It should be for protecting ecosystem functioning, and consequently, it will have an impact on climate benefits.
Thank you. And again, I think this comes back to actually the ocean literacy and understanding it enough to understand the impacts that they're having. We have just a quick minute for another question if anyone has one. We have one at the front here.
Thanks. So a lot of the discussion today has been around giving access to ocean literacy to groups that don't have that easy access, and I'm wondering a little bit whether this is the best approach. What do we want to achieve with ocean literacy, and then given that resources are limited, we can be realistic about that, shouldn't we literate or provide ocean literacy to those who are inclined, maybe those who live at the coast, who can be reached more easily? So can the ambition be as honorable as it is, but from a practical term, can the ambition be to really educate everyone, or should we be more focused?
Excellent, thank you. Well, I think we are also running out of time, so maybe I would ask you to round that question into your closing statements. Pierre, maybe we could start with you. What's your kind of closing statement from today, and are we being too ambitious with this?
Thank you. I go back to what you asked, where should we put effort? And it goes back to the source of a problem that explains what Ivan illustrated. We had at some point a project that was as a call for a Mission Ocean or Horizon Europe call that was about how to bring environmental issues to citizens. And the call was very much on citizen science. And our interpretation was to say, but citizen science, you just get the ones that are already on board. You do a bit some exercise, you collect some maybe interesting knowledge, but it's not what is going to drive a transformation. And our approach was to say, but still, the problem is the functioning of our society. So maybe when we are all using Airbnb, when I will go to an Airbnb platform and I will try to find a place, if I would make more visible the connections to environmental issues, to the oceans, to problems, etc., and then it would progressively get to people's mind, and then they will finish their stay. They will put a couple of comments, not only about the neighbors, that was very nice, the owner they gave a bottle of champagne, and it was very nice, but they would give a couple of very simple information about a state of what was around them that had positive or negative impact on them. We felt this was probably a much more efficient way to bring the conversation forward.
Excellent, thank you. Let's pass the microphone down the line. Gail, what's your closing statement from today, and should we be more ambitious or less ambitious, and who should we be focusing on?
You will never hear me say we must be less ambitious. We must definitely be more ambitious, but I really I understand your question, and I thank you for that. We had this discussion internally, who should we focus on, where should we start, etc. It's a very difficult one. I think we should have environmental education first in all curricula as an obligation, and there we'll have a lot of impacts. So we are trying to reflect more on the impacts we have. So, but at the same time, we cannot exclude some people from the discussion and our efforts. So this is the reason why I'm a bit annoyed with your question. So we must be ambitious in terms of quality, in terms of quantity, in terms of the impact we have, but also in being inclusive. So I cannot answer really with a yes, no to your question. So my final statement would be we need to intensify our efforts even more now that we see that political projections are maybe very bad for the future. So we must continue. The situation is bad, but at the same time we have a lot of mobilized people and people ready to act. So let's continue and let's pursue ocean literacy efforts together with having good policies in place, because this is really what helps, to have both policy, decision makers, action together with information, education going hand in hand. So,
thank you, Willem. What's your key takeaway from today's event?
Yeah, maybe I'll focus my key takeaway at least partly on what you said before, Gail, in response to my call for working together with the private sector. So I think there you mentioned that, of course, the private sector can't drive this debate, and there I agree. But I think it's absolutely necessary to involve them in this discussion, and to really work together with them on this debate, see how we can reduce their impact, work together with them, and also see how they can be part of the solution, as they currently are in, for example, the offshore wind sector. So I'd like to focus on that. I would like to have a longer discussion with Ivan on the benefits of economic growth, but I think we don't have the time for that. I'm personally a big proponent.
There's time afterwards, so if anyone wants to see
so
that
we'll do
discussion,
that.
find them afterwards.
And I'll hand it over to you then, Ivan.
Excellent, thank you. Your final comment.
Just
Over.
see the result of 70 years, and especially from the 90s, the free trade and growth with no limits and capital financing, which is exploding the wealth capitalization in few hands and over-exploitation of resources, and it's just the factual things. And that makes me to rely on and also to focus on terms of information, but and also coming election, and we're also facing a strong questioning or doubt about science value against opinions. Last spring, when the natural restoration law was at play, then suddenly some political groups were questioning the science, whereas it was already known 3 years ago when the proposal was announced by our president, including other Green Deal objectives. Suddenly, science was questioned, and we have to prove that to protect or to restore is beneficial for, and that we should continue to do the things that are causing the situation we are now in terms of soils death. So we have a mission on soils because they are dying of intensive agriculture. We have a mission ocean because we have reports from decades, and despite the policies which are good but not implemented enough, especially in Europe. I mean, we have fantastic policies around the world, but not enough implemented. But the state of the environment report of the European environmental agencies just keep saying the situation is getting worse, and the measures we are taking to solve them, and we are continuing the same causes. So it's difficult to imagine by doing the same thing, the same logic, we get some different result. That Einstein said. That's so we have to change the value of science or the way we communicate it, and or it not be elitist. It should be something part of a natural understanding, like how to navigate, to make a life. We need to learn to read, to speak a bit, and to analyze books and things, and to know about natural science, like we are, what we eat, what we feel. That should be so, but it's long term. So curriculum, yes, of course it should be, and maybe to count on role model influencers that are accessible, not elite stuff, because of people they are still dreaming of footballer driving supercars. They got millions of followers.
Thank you.
But so to have people showing the good stuff and enjoyment with simple things as nature and ocean.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for your questions as well. I think we've really heard the need for ocean literacy, the challenges that it faces, but also the fact that everyone in Europe needs to be involved in this, from the policymakers who are deciding what to do with our oceans to the people who are affecting it and the children who are going to be making those decisions in the future. So next up we have a documentary that is going to tell us more about that, called Sinking Islands. I assume it will be up on this screen here, so I will invite the panel to retake their seats and please enjoy. Here, so I will invite the panel to retake their seats and please enjoy. Here, so I will invite the panel to retake their seats and please enjoy. Here, so I will invite the panel to retake